everybody. Today we are talking about Lovecraft Country episode
Woo!
Sunset or Sundown?
Sundown.
Sundown. I'm joined today by my wonderful girlfriend Amanda, and we're going to be discussing Lovecraft Country, which is above all a mouthful. I have trouble saying that name over and over. But a show I have been looking forward to seeing for some time now. I'm a huge fan of Lovecraft stories, and Amanda is a great critical mind. So I am looking forward to this discussion.
I criticize everything.
She really does. You think it would get old, but it doesn't.
Oh.
No. But okay, so let's jump into it first let's talk a little bit about what we thought the show might have been when we first saw like the trailer, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about like towards the end, like how it was kind of different from what we thought it was going to be, or maybe some of your expectations were kind of met. For me, when I heard of Lovecraft Country, I didn't know it was a book. And I had understood for some reason it was a graphic novel, which I also didn't look into. I didn't read it, but knowing that it was a show based in the lore of Lovecraft, I was very excited. I was a little concerned about how they would pull off some of the aspects of a Lovecraftian story, cosmic horror, dread, that kind of stuff. And then kind of keep it running through a show. And so I was kind of curious, like, oh, is it going to be like an anthology series like Black Mirror or something like that? I really had no idea what I was in for when I started this show. But I had heard some good things about it, mostly from Amanda. And so...
See, I'm not a big critic. I don't have good things to say about bad things.
That's fair. But yeah, so that was kind of my expectation going into it. I kind of, once I learned it was going to be like a black family protagonist, like the protagonist of the story, I was like, okay, so it's going to have to deal a lot with racism. You know, when you deal with Lovecraft in general, you have to talk about that. We'll talk about that in a second. But you know, I was kind of afraid, like how heavy is it going to lean on, you know, racism is bad, and at some point you're like, yeah, I know, but also can you tell me a good story? And I was kind of afraid that that's all it was going to lean on, was kind of being you know, anti Nazi and anti racism and stuff like that. And I was like, well, you know. Yeah,
I think it's important to establish like what was going on during time, and that's what I really like about the show is like it does. And I love this about like any show, like Indiana Jones, where it walks like these things actually happened, but then you have like a mystical, like this is a higher fiction that's going on with the actual realities. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that's something that I think they did really well, is like I didn't want them to make it seem like everything they're doing is fiction. That's a really important thing, is like you don't want to tell people with your art like, oh, this is a fiction show, therefore everything in here is fiction. And they're doing a really good job, especially in the first episode, establishing these are actually things that happened in the 50s to these families, and it really establishes realism that helps stabilize the characters. Like we as audience are able to navigate the world through their eyes. Yeah. And we have these little landmarks throughout the story, like, oh yeah, that actually happened. I know this happened. I know that people had to survive this way in real life. So
right. Yeah, it did a really good job, and it does hinge a lot of the story on racism, but it does it in a way, and we'll talk about this, I guess, closer towards the end, because it's for an actual like a story driven reason that they do it, and I think I understand the reasoning behind it. Like once you get to the end, that kind of exclamation point, I was like, oh, okay, that makes that pop up. Like the contrast is a little bit higher towards the end.
Mhm.
But
So we start with Atticus Freeman. He was in the Korean War, so it ended in 53. So we're looking at a timeline that's 54, 55. So he's
shit.
going from Jacksonville, where I believe he was stationed,
Mhm.
to Chicago, where he's originally from. And whole reason he's going to Chicago is he found out his father has been kidnapped, missing. They
Mhm.
don't necessarily know. He left a note, which
Yeah.
honestly, I don't know how he read it because it is really tight lettering.
Real rough to read. It's like a couple of sticks, and it looks like a skyline of something.
Yeah. He makes it to Chicago. He stays with his aunt and uncle, which his uncle is a guy that's going around the North and writing a travel guide for Black people to safely travel throughout the country and avoid unnecessary racism. Well, avoid racism.
It's all kind of unnecessary.
uh, avoid unnecessary contact with racists.
There you go.
He gets there, and him and his uncle are talking about going to find his father in this Ardham place. I see I'm messing up. And we talked about this. I don't know exactly why, but Letitia Lewis,
Yeah.
she is also a character that she goes with them. I'm not entirely sure why, besides maybe to go talk to her uncle about getting more money.
I think that's what their argument was about at some point in the show. They start arguing about like she wants more money or something like that. And he's
mm,
like, "Well, the money I gave you," and then that's kind of what starts off that whole argument later.
yeah, but they stay with her uncle, and he has more information about like Devon County, which is where this Ardham place is.
Mhm.
And they say that it's founded by witch hunters, which already spooky, scary stuff. But still, we're settled in this realism, so we see them go through these situations where there's racists following them. Like they go into a they go into a cafe and automatically run out because they are Black,
Mhm.
and they're followed in a car and they're being shot at, and then mysteriously there is a silver car that saves them, and
Mhm.
a spooky white lady comes out. Like
Yeah.
she like she scares me, and it's one of those unsettling, like she looks like a vampire to me. She's like true blood vampire look. So
Yeah.
yeah, so then they end up with the uncle, or Letitia's uncle. They leave from his house and enter Devon County, which they find out that because they're traveling there, they do as much research as possible. So the uncle tells them that the sheriff is terribly racist and to watch out because it is a sundown county, which these are true things that happen. Is when Black people were traveling through a county, the local police department would tell them they cannot be in the county if it was sundown, so they would have to leave fast.
Mhm.
Well, I don't know if it was county. I know for sure there was towns, but I mean,
I think it's more common for them to be towns or something like that. Yeah.
but this was a county, and they find themselves in an issue with the sheriff where he sees them pulled over because they're lost, and he says, "You better get out." And they make it as fast as they can to the county border, but they are stopped by the other sheriffs that I assume, or other police that I assume the sheriff called in backup.
Mhm.
So Yeah, they are dragged into the forest, and they're most likely going to be shot until, I don't know what these things are. Turkeys? Turkey
So,
vampires?
so what they are, they're Shoggoths, which is
Oh.
it's an alien. Um, I've never understood them to look the way they did in the show. The way they're represented in the show are these essentially mole rat looking things, with like little arms, and they've got kind of like big legs and just like one big mouth and like eyes everywhere. The way I've always understood them described is they are these like gelatinous looking blobs that don't necessarily have like a set of legs or a set of arms. They have tentacles and they have like limbs just kind of jutting out of them. And
Yeah.
they will use them whenever it's opportune, but that's about it. I always kind of imagine them looking more like the blobfish. You know how it looks like it's melted, but with like tentacles, and that's just
Mhm.
kind of what I assumed they looked like based on like how I heard them described in oh, what is it? Mountains of Madness, I think is what it is. Um, but yeah, so like whenever I saw those creatures like showing up in the forest, I was like, I don't think that's a Shoggoth. I think that's like there's another story called The Lurking Fear, where there's this thing that like
Mhm.
burrows tunnels underneath a castle and a town and it eats people. And I was like, oh, maybe that's what that's supposed to be.
That sounds like it to
Right. But
me.
like it doesn't have 1,000 eyes though, and that's one thing that they do emphasize on these creatures is that they have eyes everywhere. So I think it actually is supposed to be a Shoggoth, but maybe just like a different type that I'm not familiar with.
Maybe.
Anyway, yeah.
These things sound like turkeys to me because I swear when he's like it's just the wolves, and then they make a like, I don't think that's a wolf, sheriff.
Wolf blood? No, I don't think you know what a wolf is.
So they're in the show. They're described as like these, I assume, like dog-like
Mm-hmm.
vampires, and if you're bit, you turn into one. Also, do not like light. That's where I get the vampire thing. So they are running from them, and the only people that aren't attacked are the people that had the flashlights. Everyone gets separated, and they find this cabin in the woods. At one point, the sheriff he got bit, and he's also in the cabin with them, and he starts like transforming and stuff. So they have to shoot him. Like it pretty much, their life's in danger, and the only thing that's going to save them is going to get the car and turning on the light and or the
Mm-hmm.
headlights, and just staying in there the whole night. So they do that after they have the whole interaction with them, and they're safe except for the sheriffs and
Yeah.
policemen. Um, they make it to Ardham, and that's where you end the show. The end's like not happy, not totally like out of the woods kind of thing. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
still in danger.
Yeah.
At least that's what it feels like at the end. Like, oh no, what have we gotten ourselves into now?
Just like some of the higher points of that, uh, the summary of the show. When you start off with the nightmare, that was a really cool scene. I really enjoyed
Mm.
it. Um,
Oh my gosh.
I will say, like, at first I was a little concerned. I was like, oh, this looks kind of weird. Like everyone looks a little bit fast forwarded while he's running through this. And then once you realize it's a nightmare and it's a dream and it's dream logic that's happening. And then you see like Cthulhu like breaking through the ground, and then you see like War of the Worlds creature, or like the
Mm-hmm.
walkers and stuff like that. I was like, oh, okay, I see what's happening. And then Deja Thoris, I think, is the one who drops down from the sky and is like the queen of Mars. And she drops down, and I start seeing all these things. And I was like, oh, okay, this is actually pretty cool. I like this. Um, and then he snaps out of it, and then you kind of get that conversation between him and the lady in the back of the bus, and then they kind of start setting up the world that you're living in, the time frame that you're living in, and like all of the the stuff that they have to live with. These characters have to live with. So So we'll get into this part of the what I knew was kind of unavoidable about making a show in 2020 about Lovecraft lore. You have to deal with the separation between art and artist. And as I'm thinking about that while I'm watching this show, the characters are polite enough to have that conversation for me. And I really so what was the line that's in that show about stories?
So he's talking to the lady that was on the bus. So what happens on the bus is the bus breaks down
Mm-hmm.
and the rescue truck comes, and he just knows that they're not going to be able to ride
Mm-hmm.
because it's an all white vehicle assumed. So he grabs the lady's luggage and they're talking, and she asks like, what book are you reading? And he's reading The Princes of Mars, which is John Carter.
Mm-hmm.
And John Carter in the book was a Confederate soldier, and they're talking about like how she says like, I can't believe you're reading that because it's about a Confederate soldier. And he says this quote: stories are like people, you cherish them and you try to overlook their flaws. And that's,
Yeah.
everyone I think that loves Lovecraft has that outlook. Is like, yeah, I know that he's said some terrible things,
Right.
but you still enjoy the world building.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's a really good quote. That's a really good line, because yeah, you do have to kind of separate the art from the artist, and because if you don't do that, you're gonna start finding a lot of stuff that you can't enjoy anymore, and that's not fair, you know. But like that's kind of how like tragedies work, or bad things work. Like it's almost never like positive experiences in your life that teach you the best lessons. It's always the most negative things. And so it is important to still take, no matter how bad something is, take something positive from it. Lovecraft had a lot of negative aspects to his life. He was like a Nazi what's it called, sympathizer. He didn't, he wrote what he did about black people. He had a lot of bad parts about him, but he explored some really interesting parts of horror. And what makes people afraid is, I mean, he did use his xenophobia to create really interesting stories. And you can take those parts, though, that aspect of it, and still admit, yeah, he was a bad person, but he wrote some good things. And while I will never understand him in all aspects of his life, I will say that I grew to love the mythology he built. That was cosmic horror, and that was this existential dread from his distribution of power through his characters in the universe and protagonists. And that's something I guess that we can also talk about. Is the biggest thing that I was kind of afraid of is that they're going to display, or they're going to show every white person in this show is going to be racist, is going to be bad. And that's exactly what happens until you get to the end, where the white guy. So every white person that you see in the show is either openly racist or doesn't interact with them at all, right? No one shows them any kindness. No one greets them. No one smiles at them until you get to the end. And that's why I think that was meant to be like a punctuation of like, here's a white person. He's the whitest person you'll ever see. He's super white, blonde, and he says, welcome home. And he's like greeting, and he's happy, and he's,
yeah,
and
but that's
voting. I'm not saying like, oh, finally, a nice, white person. What I'm saying is like, it was meant for that contrast. I think that's more of the reason they did it. That's what I think.
To me, it felt suspicious. Like,
well, yeah, if everybody you meet is racist and white,
well,
a nice white person's gonna seem suspicious. But, yeah.
Yeah, that's where I was like, at the end, it's like, oh no, what have we gotten ourselves into? He's
Mm-hmm.
too nice, and like,
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, oh, what's
But yeah, and so like I think that was like the main reason is so that it would pop out more at you. Like this
mm,
is why is this a white person so nice? You know, everyone else has been racist, and I think it was meant more for that. Yeah, so watching this episode, it did feel a lot like a short story that Lovecraft would tell. Now, granted, Lovecraft probably wouldn't have expanded that much on character development and that stuff. He wasn't great at that. I will say that that was one of his shortcomings. That he wasn't great at like making you care a whole bunch for the protagonist, because a lot of the ways he talked, it just it felt very I don't know, devoid of feeling.
mm,
Um, I don't know if that was just kind of how he was in life, and he just, he didn't really have emotions like most people do. But it was I think it was kind of hard for him to make you care about a character on a level that like they were human. They were
yeah,
really. You always felt like they were just characters. They were what was necessary to tell this story. Um, but in every Lovecraft story, you have your protagonist who is, for the most part, usually just a mortal who is very capable of dying. Sometimes they do. Most of the time they do. They have a lot of weaknesses and they have a lot of problems. Sometimes they're, alcoholics. Sometimes they're drug addicts. Sometimes they're, they do have their human flaws, um, but they're never powerful. They're never the ones with all of the magic. They're never the ones with all of the technology or all of the whatever, right? The power always goes to something that is either um, completely, that either completely despises you. So, like another human being that's a bad guy that just wants all the power in the world and wants
mm,
to kill anybody who would stand in his way, or it goes to something that couldn't care less about you. So it goes to Cthulhu, Nyarlathotep. It goes to Shoggoths. It goes to things that consider you completely insignificant and they don't care about humanity or even this realm of existence because they exist in several different kinds of realms of existence at once. And this does still tie into like I guess the racism portions of the show, to see that like these characters feel so helpless most of the time because they know they can't really do anything about their circumstances other than run. And that's about all you can do in most Lovecraft stories. You can run, but ultimately your world will not change. Ultimately, there's nothing you can do to stop this
mhm.
overcasting shadow of doom, which is in this case racism. In this case, it's prejudice. It's all of these things. So I really did enjoy that.
I think, okay, honesty here, I have not read a lot of Lovecraft stories. The ones I have are very kind of like, I read The Thing at the Door.
Mhm.
I think that one's like sexist.
Well, add
But you've told me,
another notch to his belt of bad things with not the
but
least
like
of it.
you said, yeah, like you said, the character in it, that's the evil person,
Mhm.
it's actually a man in disguise. That it's a woman, but it's actually a man in disguise that wanted all this power.
Mhm.
And it just kind of confirms to me that like, oh, you can't be a powerful person unless
Mhm.
you're evil.
Yeah.
Or like, yeah, so the what I was getting from this story is almost like antithesis to what you were just saying, is
Mhm.
these characters, even though it seems like it's helpless and they have no other way to solve their problems besides running,
Mhm.
these characters are very like, they're organized, they know their next steps, and
Yeah.
even when something does happen that surprises them,
Mhm.
they can process it and they fight. They're fighting for their lives.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's, I like that portion of it where you say that Lovecraft stories are like these people being helpless, but when it comes to Lovecraft Country, these people are actually trying to maneuver through the craziness. And it goes back into like what happened in real history and what's happening there. So I feel like they're more set. Like they have a history of already trying to figure out how to get out of things that are going to kill them. And they will be able to maneuver the world of Lovecraft way better than somebody who's never had to deal with that.
Yeah. That's a good point. There are some stories like where your protagonist will fight back and they're able to stave off their particular monster or whatever. But like whenever I say that, like essentially all you can really do is run. What I mean is like you can buy yourself some time, but ultimately you'll never be able to kill Cthulhu. You'll never be able to kill Nyarlathotep or Thoth or whatever looming demigod is bearing down on the world and about to destroy it or whatever. And I think those things are represented in the cultural oppression of these characters and the lack of human rights that they have, because that's something that like, yeah, you can fight, racists with guns if you have to. You can get away with your lives, but ultimately it's the system that is bearing down on you. The system is Cthulhu. The system is, you know what I mean? Like,
Justin, your first T-shirt, the system is Cthulhu. The system is Cthulhu.
I mean, not to get too political on this, but like that's how I feel most of the time. Like I as a human, and you and I have talked about this at length, and you're always telling me to vote and stuff, but I'm like, but it's Cthulhu. I can't vote Cthulhu out of office because then Nyarlathotep's just gonna take over. If I vote out Nyarlathotep, then here comes Yog-Sothoth or Yig. You don't want Yig ruling over you. He's the god of snakes. That one's the worst one. But anyway, so
Yig 2020.
Yig 2020. I don't know. Maybe it's not so bad. But he's from Oklahoma. It'll be fine. I guess okay. So, but yeah, that story does take place in Oklahoma.
Was that part of the musical?
Yeah, he's got a big number in there. But anyway, so yeah, I think that's an interesting way to kind of approach a Lovecraft story, is to kind of have these stand-ins where it's not strictly an allegory like a one-for-one, but it is very applicable to that style of storytelling of cosmic horror or existential dread.
Well, yeah, just racism in general is existential dread, is it not?
Yeah, I guess once you get to the end, like who are the the kind of the big mystery, the cliffhanger of like who are these like mysterious very white people that are that are taking an interest in this family. What is this family's heritage? And it's kind of like hinted at, but not quite divulged yet. And we're going to learn that I assume in the coming episodes. But it's very interesting. If I could, I'd tell everybody, I recommend check it out. It's a good show.
Well, we were talking about Dracula the other night, and like how I just really want a good Dracula, and it's pretty much just visually. Like, I know that nobody wants to hear the story,
but I do. Yeah.
I already know it. I love the storyline, and I really just want to see. And like the Moffat one started that way, and then it went woo. So, but I feel like you are getting what I really want. Like you get the Lovecraft story that I can't get with the Bram Stoker. So.
I'm getting decent fan service out of this. I will admit that. Like, as a fan of Lovecraft, but not so much racism. I am enjoying this show so far. First episode, but I have a good feeling about it. I hope the rest of the episodes live up to the first episode's like tones and themes and the way that it's paced. It's paced very well. It's like a short movie. Like I said, it feels like a Lovecraft story, but just modernized to the point of like, hey, we need more character development. We need to care about who these characters are, charismatic leads and stuff like that. Not just cold, devoid of like personality. I guess it is. They don't quite feel very fleshed out sometimes. They're very matter of fact kind of people, and it's hard to care about that kind of stuff. So these characters, they have personality. They feel well rounded, and the writing on the show is good enough to where it can tell you backstory about these characters without feeling like it's A, shoving it down your face, or B, being too vague and you don't understand what they're talking about. It has a nice happy medium there. It's a recommend for me. I would give it probably like on a scale of 1 to 10. The first episode would probably get like an 8 for me, which is still really high. It's not. I don't think I'll ever have a 10 because a 10 would be perfect. There's nothing I would do to it. There's nothing I would change. 9 is like really close to perfect. I don't know if I have a 9 either, but like this is probably like an 8.5, probably close to a 9. This is a really good start. I think it's a strong start.
I mean, this is the one time I'm going to have something that's higher than you, because I think it's well written. It's cinematically beautiful. Editing, I don't have an issue with it. The storyline flowed properly, and I usually that's my biggest pet peeve now is people don't know how to edit things. So I'm gonna say, overall, it is really close to being a 10 for me. I love this show. And pacing might be a little slow, but I'm okay with it.
I didn't have a problem with the pacing. Like, I don't know if you're getting into this show, all right, if you're getting into something called Lovecraft Country, I think the pacing is just fine, because that's you're kind of expecting a show that flows well with storytelling. It's got to feel like a short story, and I think that's what it feels like. You've got good propulsion of your characters. They don't feel dead. They feel alive. They feel like real people characters. They don't feel sterile. I guess that's the word I was looking for to describe most of Lovecraft characters. They feel very sterile. It's like a doctor is describing them. They're patients, or they're subjects. They're not quite people with fleshed out lives. But it's a really good story. It's a really good character driven story. They don't rely too much on, it's a monster. It doesn't feel like a B movie where it's just like you have these placeholder people for a monster to eat or tear through or whatever. It feels like a good story, and that's what I was happy with.
Yeah, and I say pacing because there's parts of it where it's pretty silent and you have to kind of just watch the character react to things. And especially the one where he goes into the old apartment and he sees the fist in the wall, and you're like, okay, yeah, I get it, but it seems a little slow. You could have sped it up just a tad bit. But I do agree, as far as developing a character, you need to go through his processes, give him breathing times. And that's why I said the only thing would be potentially the pacing. But I really love this show, and I just can't find a lot to nitpick about.
Yeah, but you know what? I think this is probably the longest we've talked about something that we both enjoy. I don't really have anything bad to say other than, it's good. That's fine. It's good. it's nice to be able to kind of the things that you like and why you like it, I think. All right, we'll go ahead and end it here. And then I guess next week we'll talk about episode 2, Whitey's on the Moon. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it is a really good episode, so I'm excited to talk about that one in depth too.
All right. And I guess it goes without saying, spoilers, everybody. There's a bunch of spoilers.
Yeah, if you don't want to have things spoiled for you, just forget the last like hour.
Probably should have led with that, but the important thing is it's too late. All right. Thanks for joining us. I'll see you guys next time. You have a good rest of the day, evening, morning, whatever. Bye.
Bye. Do you have a name for your people, like your fans?
I don't have a name for my fans yet, like the lovelies or the dudes or the bros or something. I don't know if I'm not gonna come up with one on the spot because I don't.
You goodbye, every comic book fan, true believer.
True believe? Well, no, because that limits you to just Marvel.
True believers in Batman.
Nobody believes in Batman.
I mean, Robin.
Which one? None of the Robins really believe in Batman, though. I'm gonna end this video. We're not even talking about that country. All right, goodbye, everybody. I'll see you later. I'll come up with nicknames for all of you some other time.